Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. I always thought I was a strong, reliable man, a devoted husband, a caring father, and a hard-working carpenter. But over time, I began to notice that Sophia's words cut deeper than any physical blow. At first, it was little things, a dismissive tone here, a sarcastic remark there. During our weekly family dinners at the winery we had visited on vacation, she would casually remark about my clumsy attempts at fixing things around the house, or how my work would never compare to her glamorous career as a wedding planner. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself that her humor was simply part of her personality, but deep inside, I felt a gnawing pain and a growing sense of insignificance. One crisp autumn evening, as our children played in the backyard and the aroma of roasted chestnuts filled the air, we gathered for a celebration with our relatives. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, with laughter floating on the breeze and soft music playing in the background. I was recounting a story about a project I had completed, one that had taken countless hours of careful craftsmanship, when Sophia interjected with a laugh that sent a shiver down my spine. "Oh, Jake, you're so adorable when you try to be serious about your work," she said in a tone dripping with condescension. The room fell silent for a moment, and I could feel every eye turning toward me. My cheeks burned with shame as an uncomfortable murmur rippled through the guests. I sat frozen, torn between the urge to defend myself and the crushing weight of humiliation. Inside, I wrestled with a torrent of emotions: anger, hurt, and a desperate need to be seen as more than just a punchline to her jokes. Later that evening, as the party wound down and the guests began to leave, I retreated to the quiet solitude of the kitchen. I leaned against the counter, grappling with the harsh realization that the woman I had trusted and loved was slowly eroding my confidence with every cutting remark. How long will I let this continue? I thought, the question echoing in the silence. I recalled the countless times I had swallowed my pain, pretending that her words meant nothing, all in the hope that someday she might see the effort I put in for our family. But now, with every disparaging laugh and every sly glance exchanged among our relatives, it became clear that her mockery was deliberate, a daily assault on my dignity. I wondered if I was merely too meek, or if there was something inherently wrong with me that invited such cruelty. The relentless sting of her words left me questioning not only my abilities as a husband and a father, but also my self-worth. As I stared out the kitchen window at the darkening sky, I felt a deep, unsettling resolve taking root. That night, as I lay awake listening to the soft hum of the house, I vowed to myself that I could no longer remain silent in the face of this emotional abuse. I knew that the time had come for a change, even if the road ahead was shrouded in uncertainty and pain. That evening, I found myself at an intimate dinner party hosted by one of my closest friends, a gathering I had looked forward to as a welcome distraction for the constant undercurrent of pain at home. The setting was warm, with soft lighting and gentle background music, the table adorned with flickering candles and polished silverware. I sat among colleagues and neighbors, hoping for an evening of light-hearted conversation, yet the air was charged with an unspoken tension that I couldn't shake. As the night progressed, Sophia's presence dominated the room with her effortless charm and a dazzling smile that belied the venom in her words. When the conversation turned to our work and personal achievements, she leaned in with a mischievous glint in her eye and remarked loudly, "Isn't it funny how Jake's always so dedicated to his carpentry? It's like he thinks every splinter is a badge of honor." Her tone was playful, yet each word cut through me like a cold knife. A ripple of laughter spread among our friends, and I could feel their eyes flicking in my direction, some sympathetic, others amused. I forced a smile, pretending the joke wasn't as painful as it felt, but inside, a storm of humiliation and anger was brewing. I recalled all the times I had supported her ambitions, all the sacrifices I had made for our family, only to be reduced to the butt of her cruel jests. The final straw came when, mid-conversation, she continued, "I mean, I know she works hard, but come on, How can a man so obsessed with his tools ever keep up with modern trends? The words reverberated in my ears. For a moment, the laughter around me blurred into a singular, overwhelming focus on the mockery that had been inflicted upon me once again. I felt my pulse quicken as my inner voice screamed, "Enough!" The room, once filled with casual chatter, seemed to fall into a heavy silence as I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. All eyes turned towards me, and I could see the shock and uncertainty in their faces. "Sophia," I said, my voice trembling at first, but gaining strength with every syllable, "I have tolerated your jabs and your put-downs for far too long. I have supported you, cherished you, and yet you make a sport of belittling me in front of the people I care about." Her smile faltered for a split second, replaced by a flash of indignation. "Jake, you're overreacting," she snapped, trying to regain control. It was just a joke, but there was no humor left in the room, only the raw edge of my anger and the uncomfortable silence of stunned guests. "A joke," I retorted, my voice steadier now, echoing in the stillness. "Every time you dismiss my efforts, every time you laugh at my expense, you chip away at my dignity. I am not your prop, not your punching bag for amusement." I paused, glancing around at the faces that now bore witness to my pain, feeling both exposed and empowered. I've spent too many years bending over backwards for this family, only to be reduced to a punchline. I won't let my sacrifices be mocked any longer. The tension in the room was palpable as I returned to my seat, my eyes locked on hers as she fumbled for a retort that never came. In that charged moment, I realized that the foundation of our relationship, built on a facade of perfection and false support, was crumbling before the eyes of our friends. The humiliation I had endured wasn't just a fleeting moment of ridicule. It was a symptom of a much deeper, more insidious neglect. As the room slowly filled with murmurs and shifting glances, I sank into a heavy silence, the weight of my shattered self-esteem settling over me like a dark cloud. The bitter truth was undeniable. My identity, my self-worth, had been twisted into a source of entertainment for someone I had once trusted implicitly. That night, as I left the party with a storm of conflicting emotions raging inside me, I realized that something had to change. I had reached the boiling point, a moment where silence was no longer an option. I wondered if I could ever reclaim the dignity that had been so ruthlessly stripped from me. And as I walked away, I vowed silently that the next chapter of my life would be about finding my voice and refusing to be diminished any longer. Late one rainy afternoon, as I was trying to clear the clutter from our rarely used study, my hands brushed against something unusual behind a stack of old blueprints and project notes. Curiosity outweighed caution as I tugged gently at a loose panel, revealing a small, ornate wooden box tucked away in a dark corner. My heart began to race as I slowly opened it, only to find an expensive cuff bracelet and a sleek silver tie clip, items that clearly weren't meant for me. In that moment, a cold dread washed over me, mixing with the bitter taste of betrayal. I froze, my mind racing through every memory of Sophia's dismissive smiles and the subtle, almost imperceptible glances she exchanged when she thought I wasn't looking. "What is this?" I whispered to myself, the shock resonating through every fiber of my being. The delicate craftsmanship and unmistakable quality of the items told a story that I had never been part of, a story that belonged to someone else. I sank into the nearby armchair, clutching the box tightly as I tried to piece together the implications of this discovery. My thoughts tumbled in a whirlwind. Had I been blind to her secret life, to the whispered phone calls and the late-night excuses that she once brushed off as work-related stress? The evidence staring back at me was undeniable, and a painful realization began to form in my mind. This wasn't just another one of her thoughtless jabs or careless words. It was a calculated betrayal. As I sat there, the room dimly lit by the fading light of dusk, my inner turmoil grew louder. Every memory of her laughter at my expense and every dismissive comment now took on a sinister clarity. I recalled the way she had brushed off my questions about her long hours and the mysterious wedding surprise she had giggled about on the phone. A mixture of anger, grief, and a heavy sense of injustice filled me. I realized that her relentless verbal assaults, her constant belittlement, had been laced with something far more painful, a method to justify her own infidelity. My heart pounded as I tried to steady my shaking hands. I knew I could no longer ignore the signs, nor could I allow her continued cruelty to define the rest of my life. The evidence in that small box was a silent testament to the lies that had permeated our home. I sat back, taking a deep breath, and made a resolute decision. I wouldn't confront her blindly or in a burst of raw emotion. Instead, I would gather undeniable proof, piece by piece, until the truth was laid bare for everyone to see. Determination replaced despair as I carefully closed the box and tucked it away in a secure drawer. The act was both a small rebellion and the first step toward reclaiming my dignity. As I glanced around the now quiet room, I felt a heavy sadness for the years I had wasted believing in a love that was never truly mine, but also a spark of defiance ignited within me. I whispered to myself, "No more," acknowledging that this was the turning point. I would document every detail, every discrepancy in her story, until I had constructed a case that could not be denied. With that resolve, I set forth on a path of careful investigation, knowing that the road ahead would be filled with painful truths, yet also the promise of liberation. The shadows in a room seemed to recede as I envisioned a future free from the chains of her betrayal, a future where my worth was recognized and my voice, long silenced, would finally be heard. In the days following that painful discovery, I began to realize that I could no longer remain a silent victim. The hidden box, with its costly cuff bracelet and sleek tie clip, was more than just a symbol of betrayal. It was the catalyst that transformed my despair into a burning resolve for retribution. I spent long, sleepless nights poring over every detail, analyzing the discrepancies in Sophia's stories and piecing together the puzzle of her secret life. I knew that confronting her head-on in a fit of raw emotion wouldn't bring me the justice I craved. Instead, I needed a methodical plan that would expose her duplicity beyond any doubt. My first step was to replace the incriminating gift with a counterfeit replica so perfect in every way that she wouldn't suspect a thing until it was too late. I contacted a discreet jeweler, using a pseudonym and careful instructions, to craft a near-identical cuff bracelet and tie clip. Every conversation with the jeweler felt like a small victory, a step toward reclaiming control over my shattered life. In the dim light of my workshop, I practiced the delicate art of substitution. With trembling hands and a steady gaze, I carefully extracted the original items from their hidden place and replaced them with their flawless duplicates. It was a silent act of defiance, a declaration that I was taking back what had been stolen from me, my dignity. But that was only the beginning. I knew that to dismantle the carefully constructed facade of her double life, I needed irrefutable proof of her ongoing deceit. One evening, while I was at home reviewing the timeline of her suspicious absences, I recalled the peculiar pattern in her late-night phone calls and the mysterious trips she claimed were solely for work. With a mix of trepidation and determination, I decided to install a tiny GPS tracker on her car. The process was nerve-wracking, each step laden with the fear of being caught and the hope that this digital breadcrumb trail would lead me straight to the heart of her secret liaisons. Late one night, under the cover of darkness, I slid silently into our driveway, tools in hand, and attached the discreet device to the underside of her car. I could almost hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears as I tightened the final screw, knowing that soon every journey she took would be logged in cold, unyielding data. Over the following days, I watched the tracker's log with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Each coordinate, each timestamp was a piece of evidence, building a damning picture of her rendezvous. In between moments of restless surveillance, I reached out to a trusted friend, a quiet confidant who had always been my rock. "I'm doing this for both of us," I told him one late evening as we sat over coffee in his cluttered garage. I'm gathering every scrap of evidence until I have a case that cannot be ignored. His steady nod and soft-spoken words of encouragement bolster my resolve. Just be careful, Jake, he warned, his voice gentle yet firm. Don't let your need for justice consume you. I knew he was right, but every day that passed deepened my determination. I organized every log, every receipt, every piece of digital data into a meticulously detailed dossier. I would use this collection as an unassailable record when the time came to expose her treachery. As I worked through nights filled with the glow of computer screens and the quiet hum of my workshop, I felt an inner transformation taking place. I was no longer the man who silently endured humiliation. I was becoming someone with purpose, a man who would force the truth into the light, regardless of the pain it might bring. Each day, with every careful step of planning, the shadow of her deception grew smaller, replaced by the growing certainty that my life could be rebuilt on the foundation of truth. I rehearsed what I would say, how I would reveal the evidence to those who mattered, and even to Sophia herself, should the moment ever come. This isn't just about me, I whispered to myself in the quiet moments before dawn. It's about reclaiming every part of my life that you try to steal. With that thought echoing in my mind, I closed my eyes, envisioning a future where the scales of justice were balanced, and my voice was no longer silenced by betrayal. The meticulous planning and the covert operations became my lifeline, guiding me away from the murky depths of despair and toward a horizon bright with the promise of vindication. I arrived at the upscale restaurant with a turbulent mix of dread and determination. The cool Napa evening, cloaking my resolve in darkness as I parked discreetly near the vineyard's elegant dining hall. The soft glow of chandeliers and the murmur of refined conversation offered no solace, only a stage for the impending confrontation. I had tracked Sophia's movements meticulously over the past few weeks, and now, with each step toward the entrance, my heart pounded with a mix of anger and sorrow. As I pushed open the door, I scanned the room and immediately spotted her. Sophia, radiant in a silk dress that betrayed none of the deception in her eyes, sat at a table adorned with delicate white linens. Across from her, the groom-to-be, an impeccably dressed man whose confident smile and casual charm told a story of secrets shared, leaned in, laughing softly as he passed her a small, elegantly wrapped gift. The sight struck me like a blow, the evidence of her betrayal now laid bare in the refined ambience of this very place. I hesitated for a heartbeat, grappling with the desire to confront her immediately and the need to remain composed. My mind recalled every painful word and every slight, all building to this moment of reckoning. With measured steps, I walked over to their table, the sound of my footsteps slicing through the low hum of conversation. When I reached the table, a stunned silence fell over the immediate area, and both Sophia and her companion turned to face me. "Sophia," I said, my voice low but resolute, "I think it's time we talk about the truth." Her eyes widened in shock, and the groom-to-be shifted uncomfortably, his smile faltering as he tried to mask his surprise. "Jake," she began, her tone wavering as she attempted to gather her thoughts. I held up a hand to silence her. "No, there's nothing you can say to make this any less real. I know about the guest house, about your late nights when you're not finalizing wedding details." My words hit the table like a gavel, each syllable laden with the accumulated pain of years spent in silence. Every time you laughed and dismissed my concerns, you chipped away at my dignity. I've spent too long watching you hide behind promises of work and perfection, while you built a secret life with him. The groom-to-be's eyes darted nervously between us. "This isn't what it looks like," he tried to interject, but I cut him off with a bitter laugh. "Don't bother trying to explain the impossible." I looked back at Sophia, my gaze unyielding. "You always said you were dedicated to your job, that you were working late for a wedding surprise, but now I know it was all just an excuse to be with someone else." For a long, agonizing moment, the restaurant was suspended in time as the murmurs of other diners drifted in like distant echoes. Sophia's face flushed with a mix of anger and despair, her eyes darting as if searching for an escape. "Jake, please," she pleaded, her voice cracking with desperation. "Save it," I replied sharply, standing taller despite the tumult inside me. I spent countless nights gathering every shred of evidence. Every misdirected phone call, every unexplained absence, it all adds up. And now here we are. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in before continuing. "I'm not here to destroy lives. I'm here to reclaim my dignity. Your actions have consequences, and you're about to face them." The tension in the room was palpable. The groom-to-be, now visibly shaken, mumbled a weak apology as Sophia stared blankly, her charm completely evaporated under the harsh light of truth. I took one final, deep breath and turned away, the echoes of shattered trust and broken promises following me as I left the table. Stepping out into the cool Napa night, I felt a mix of victorious relief and profound sadness. I had exposed the truth, and while it left me emotionally drained, I knew that this was a necessary step towards rebuilding my life. A step away from the world of deceit and into a future where I would no longer be a silent victim. After that dramatic confrontation at the restaurant, I returned home feeling as if the very ground beneath me had shifted. Everything that once felt stable was now trembling under the weight of truth. The drive back was a blur of conflicting emotions, a storm of anger, sorrow, and a cautious relief that the facade had finally been shattered. When I opened the door to our once shared house, every familiar object seemed tainted by memories of deceit and humiliation. I sank into the worn armchair in the living room, trying desperately to catch my breath and process the raw aftermath of that explosive evening. The silence was heavy, punctuated only by the faint ticking of the clock and the steady hum of distant traffic outside. I knew it wouldn't be long before Sophia returned, and I steeled myself for the inevitable confrontation. Moments later, the sound of hurried footsteps on the hardwood floor announced her arrival. She appeared in the doorway, her face a chaotic mix of fury, regret, and the unmistakable panic of someone cornered. "Jake, we need to talk," she said, her voice wavering as if uncertain whether to attack or plead. I met her gaze, the calm resolve I had cultivated over the past weeks, now coalescing into unwavering strength. "Talk, or try to twist the truth again," I replied, my tone even but charged with the pain of all the years I had endured. Her eyes flashed, and she stepped closer, her hands wringing together as if seeking comfort in their own motion. "You made a scene at the restaurant," she began, her words stumbling over themselves. "You embarrassed me, and now you're turning our home into a battleground." I shook my head slowly, my mind recalling every whispered lie, every dismissive laugh that had punctured my self-worth. "No, Sophia," I said, my voice steady and resolute. "Tonight wasn't about embarrassment. It was about truth. I have spent far too long living in the shadows of your deception, tolerating your constant need to belittle me while you led a double life." Her face contorted, a mixture of anger and desperation painting every line. "You don't understand," she argued, stepping even closer until the tension between us was almost palpable. "Everything I did was for us, to make our life perfect. I was trying to make everything work. I couldn't hold back the bitter laugh that escaped me. Make it work? All those late nights working on wedding details were nothing but excuses. I've seen the evidence, Sophia. I know about the guest house, the whispered phone calls, the secret rendezvous." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and for a moment, I saw the vulnerability beneath her hardened exterior. "Jake, please don't do this. We can fix it. Just give me a chance to explain," she pleaded, her voice softening as if hoping to reclaim some lost part of our past. But I had reached a point of no return. "No, I won't be gaslighted any longer," I said firmly, the echo of every unspoken insult fueling my words. "I deserve a life where my dignity isn't sacrificed on the altar of your lies." The silence that followed was thick and crushing, each second stretching out as if the future itself held its breath. I stood up, my decision clear in every measured step I took toward the door. I'm done, Sophia. I'm leaving this place, leaving the life built on deceit. Her voice broke as she tried to reach out, but I stepped back, the finality of my actions resonating with every stride. I'm sorry, she whispered, but I couldn't even meet her gaze. As I walked out into the cool night air, I felt both the sting of loss and the exhilarating taste of freedom. Every step away from that house was a step toward reclaiming who I was, a man no longer defined by the shadows of betrayal, but by the promise of a future built on truth and self-respect. After leaving that house and stepping into the cold night, I knew that reclaiming my dignity required more than just walking away. It meant dismantling the life built on our lies, piece by piece, through the legal system. The next morning, with a heavy heart and a newfound resolve, I made my way to a modest law firm on the outskirts of town. The reception area was quiet and unassuming, a stark contrast to the tumult inside me. I sat in a waiting room that smelled faintly of coffee and old paper, my mind replaying every moment of betrayal as I awaited the arrival of a lawyer who could guide me through the divorce process. When the door to the consultation room opened, I was greeted by a seasoned attorney with steady eyes and a calm demeanor. "Jake," he said, extending a firm handshake, "I understand you're here because you need to take action." I nodded silently, the weight of years spent in humiliation pressing down on me. Over the next hour, I recounted the details of my discovery: the cuff bracelet and tie clip hidden away, the meticulous planning that led to the exposure of Sophia's secret rendezvous at the Vineyard Guest House, and the overwhelming public humiliation at the restaurant. "Your evidence is compelling," the lawyer assured me, his tone measured and sincere. "This isn't just a case of emotional neglect. It's a clear case of betrayal, and the documents you've gathered will be crucial in court." I felt a surge of relief as he spoke, as if finally someone was validating the pain I had endured. In the following days, I spent countless hours organizing my evidence into a coherent timeline: tracker logs, receipts from the discreet jeweler, recorded phone calls, and even eyewitness account from that fateful restaurant confrontation. Every piece of information was meticulously filed, each document a brick in the foundation of my case. One afternoon, as I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by stacks of papers and digital files, the phone rang. "Jake, it's Robert," said the voice of my trusted friend and former coworker. "I've heard whispers that Sophia is trying to paint you as the villain. The bride-to-be has already been contacted by some of her associates, and they're trying to twist the narrative in her favor." I clenched my jaw, the familiar sting of betrayal mixing with a new sense of determination. "I appreciate you letting me know," I replied, my voice low but firm. "I have everything I need, and I'm prepared to set the record straight in court." In a crucial meeting with my attorney and a team of experts, I presented my meticulously gathered dossier. The room was filled with the quiet hum of computers and the scratch of pens on paper as we reviewed every detail. My lawyer looked up from the documents, his eyes reflecting both the gravity of the situation and a quiet confidence. "Jake, with this evidence, we can show the court that Sophia manipulated every situation to suit her own agenda. Her attempts to twist the story won't stand against the facts you've laid out," he declared, his voice resonating with authority. The opposing counsel later tried to paint me as a bitter, vengeful husband unable to let go of the past, but my presentation was unassailable. I felt the power dynamics shift as the judge scrutinized the timeline of events, nodding and understanding as I recounted the painful details. In one particularly intense hearing, the opposing lawyer sneered, "It seems you've turned your personal vendetta into a legal crusade," but I met his accusation with calm resolve. "This isn't about revenge," I stated evenly. "It's about reclaiming my dignity and exposing the truth for the sake of justice." With every session, every piece of evidence presented, I felt more confident that the scales of justice were tilting in my favor. The legal battle had only just begun, and while the road ahead was uncertain, I finally believed that truth and integrity would prevail over deception. In that moment, as I left the courthouse with my attorney's reassuring words echoing in my ears, I realized that I was no longer defined by the shadows of betrayal. I was on a path toward a future where my voice was heard, my sacrifices recognized, and my self-worth restored. After the legal dust settled, I began to carve out a new life, one where I could finally breathe without the weight of betrayal pressing down on every moment. I found a modest apartment on the edge of town, a small haven with sunlit windows and peeling paint that spoke of humble beginnings rather than grand promises. The space was far from luxurious, but it was mine, and each step I took inside felt like a reclaiming of my self-worth. Mornings became a time of quiet renewal. I would wake before dawn, brew a strong cup of coffee, and watch the city slowly come alive, each ray of sunlight a reminder that every day held the promise of a fresh start. I began reconnecting with my passion for carpentry, a craft that had defined me long before Sophia's laughter turned every nail and board into a symbol of my inadequacy. I dusted off old tools and set up a small workshop in a corner of my apartment. With every project I completed, a handcrafted table, a set of chairs, even a simple bookshelf, I rediscovered the satisfaction of creating something with my own hands. Each piece of wood, meticulously measured and lovingly shaped, felt like a piece of my broken spirit being mended back together. Evenings took on a new meaning as I embraced the role of an independent father. My children, who had once watched in silence as their father's smile faded with every cruel remark, now filled the apartment with laughter and warmth. We cooked dinner together, shared stories of the past, and planned for a future that was no longer dictated by deception. I took them to the local park, where the vibrant hues of autumn leaves and the crisp, refreshing air reminded me that change, though sometimes painful, was a necessary part of growth. One chilly afternoon, while sitting on a park bench with my youngest, she looked up at me and said, "You're really happy now, Dad." Her simple words struck a chord deep within me, affirming that the path I had chosen was one of healing and self-discovery. I realized that the scars left by Sophia's betrayal were slowly giving way to a new narrative, one where I was not defined by her lies, but by my own resilience. Meanwhile, news of Sophia's unraveling life trickled in like unwelcome whispers. The glittering world she had once commanded at extravagant events was now tarnished by scandal and isolation. Invitations dwindled, and the facade she had meticulously maintained began to crumble, each misstep a reminder of the truth I had so painstakingly unveiled. I refused to dwell on her downfall, though, because my focus was solely on rebuilding a life of integrity and quiet strength. I enrolled in evening classes to refine my business skills, determined to expand my carpentry into a thriving enterprise that would not only support my family, but also serve as a testament to my transformation. With each lesson learned and every small success at work, the shadows of the past receded a little further, replaced by the bright possibility of a future that I controlled. The journey was not without its setbacks. Moments of doubt and lingering pain would sometimes creep in, threatening to pull me back into old habits of silence and self-doubt. But every time I looked at my children's smiling faces or felt the satisfying weight of a perfectly crafted piece of furniture, I was reminded that leaving Sophia was the best decision I ever made. In the quiet solitude of my new apartment, as I watched the city lights shimmer in the distance, I finally felt a sense of peace, a deep, abiding certainty that I was on the right path. The fragments of my past, once so brutally shattered, were slowly being pieced back together into a mosaic of strength, hope, and renewed purpose. I realized that freedom wasn't just about leaving behind the pain. It was about embracing the future with open arms and a heart unburdened by deceit. In the months following my fresh start, karma began to work its quiet, relentless magic, transforming the world my ex-wife once ruled into a realm of chaos and regret. I began noticing subtle shifts in the social circles that once orbited around her glittering persona. News reached me in hushed tones from former colleagues and acquaintances of the winery. Invitations to elite events were drying up, and whispers of her mismanagement and questionable choices echoed in private gatherings. One afternoon, While I was wrapping up a successful project in my blossoming carpentry workshop, I received a call from an old friend from the wedding planning scene, a person who had once admired her efficiency and charm. "Jake," she said softly, her voice laden with sympathy, "I'm sorry to tell you this, but it seems Sophia's world is falling apart. Her lover has left her, and the country club is distancing itself from her now. She's struggling to keep her business afloat." The word struck me with a bittersweet resonance. While part of me felt vindicated, I also sensed a profound sadness that the life she had built on deception was crumbling under the weight of its own lies. I recalled the countless nights spent gathering evidence and the painful moments of confrontation, and I realized that the pursuit of justice had been about reclaiming my self-respect rather than exacting revenge. As her former allies began to turn their backs, Sophia found herself isolated. Social media buzzed with rumors of her financial woes and professional missteps. One evening, I sat quietly in my modest apartment, watching the city lights twinkle like distant promises, when I received a message from a former client of hers who had once hosted lavish events. "Jake, I heard Sophia has been banned from the club and that her bookings are nearly non-existent now," the message read. "I'm sorry for what you went through, but karma has a way of balancing the scales." That moment of quiet validation brought a small, wry smile to my lips. I reflected on the long, arduous journey that had taken me from a life of silent suffering to one defined by renewal and hope. My carpentry business was thriving, and I had even begun mentoring young artisans, finding fulfillment in every carefully crafted piece of furniture and every restored relationship with my children. The bitterness of revenge had faded into a distant memory, replaced by the steady beat of progress and self-discovery. I realized that while Sophia's downfall had been inevitable, my own liberation was not fueled by a desire to see her suffer, but rather by the freedom I had reclaimed from her lies. I sat down on my workbench one crisp evening and spoke aloud to the empty room. "I don't need revenge anymore. I don't have to let her failures define me." The words rang out clear and true, a quiet anthem to my newfound peace. With every passing day, I built a future where my accomplishments and inner strength mattered more than any bitter score kept. Even as I occasionally heard about her mounting struggles, a canceled event here, a public misstep there, I felt no rush to revel in her misfortune. Instead, I acknowledged that justice had been served in the natural course of life. The world had a way of revealing truths and restoring balance without me having to become the instrument of punishment. As I continued to grow professionally and personally, I found solace in the idea that my life had improved while hers had fallen apart. In that reflective stillness, I knew that my journey was not about bitterness or retaliation, but about embracing a future filled with integrity, creativity, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that truth always finds a way to prevail. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.